get the gig. Now, how do you get the gig? You get the gig with years of hard work. But all players work hard to develop their instrument. So, how do you get it over the next guy? How do you get a gig? And I'm not talking, playing down on Broadway or any of that. That's a whole different scene. Or playing gigs around Nashville. I'm talking about you're getting a chance to either go on a cattle call or you're getting the chance to go on an audition and get a position as a touring guitar player. Now, like I said, anybody that's in this business has done the work, and you can, if you get the call, if you even get the call, you can play. So, I understand that everybody is talented enough. By the time you get that call, you're going to be talented enough and people are going to know who you are. That's why they called you. But you're going to be up against, either a cattle call where it could be hundreds of other players, or it could be, 6 or 7 of the best get called for the audition. And the real question then is, how do you stand out? Okay? Now, whenever I get called for a gig, and that would be the same for if I'm down here in Tampa and all of a sudden I decide I want to start, playing gigs, what am I going to do? I'm going to do the research first. I'm going to find out if these guys have been out playing before. I'm going to find out, well, who did they have before and how long was he on the gig? And why is that important? Well, that's important for a lot of different reasons. I will look at a gig and see if there's a lot of turnover. And what do I mean by that? Has the gig had a lot of players come in and out? Has it been a revolving door? Or is it a gig that looks like it's been fairly stable, but they're changing one player? There's a big difference between those two gigs. If a band is changing players all the time, that tends to be a red flag. And I would consider this, and you could maybe even bring it up after the fact if they offer you the position. But, there's really not a whole lot you can do about that. Some gigs they go through a lot of players, and other gigs, they stick by their players. Now, if you can find a good gig that they use the same players and it seems like players stay there a long time, then that's a gig that you're going to want to get. You're going to definitely want that gig because stability as a musician is a great thing. And, as far as pay and all that, I've talked about that in other videos. So, I'm not recommending someone, take a $300 a show gig, but I understand that sometimes you got to take the opportunity at the time and see where it leads. If you're just starting up with somebody who's starting you out at 300 and they got the potential to blow up, well, maybe they will take you along for the ride with them. But getting back to the actual audition and preparing for it. Now, of course, you've got to learn the songs. You've really got to take the time to learn the material. And I know, it's real easy if something is simple or you hear it and you think, oh, this is easy, and you don't really hone in on everything. Maybe there's an extra bar before that last chorus. Maybe, the solo, or maybe there's parts that you should know all the parts. They might ask you, hey, can you play this or can you play that? But you need to commit it to memory. If you're going to go on an audition, don't show up with your iPad or a piece of paper or whatever. Playing a 4-set gig, that's a different situation. And I can't blame you for using something to help remember the stuff. But when you're auditioning for a touring gig, they don't want to see an iPad or any of that on stage. They want you to memorize the material. Now, how do you do that? You've got to do it by repetition. You've got to run the material over and over again. Now, I had an audition way back. I've been lucky where I've gotten the gigs a couple different times where I didn't have to audition. I was just told, here's what you learn. Learn, how long do you need to learn it? And I'd say, I need 2 weeks. They said, okay, you've got 2 weeks starting on this day. And I would just learn the material. And then we'd go into rehearsal for 2 days and then we'd be out on the road. I've also been in situations where they said, just learn the material and go straight out on the stage. So, this is going to give you the tips to know how to learn it. You've got to play it with repetition, and you first start out playing along to the tracks. Okay, and that's going to give you a guide. But just doing that, just playing along with the track, that is not really learning it, because you're going to find when you get in that room, the band's going to sound different than the track. There may be, backing tracks going. There could be any number of variables going on, or it could sound completely different. So you need to be able to first learn it with playing with the actual track, but then you need to learn the song with no track playing. Be able to play the part straight down with no accompaniment, or maybe just a click track. And you know what? With today's recording software, record yourself playing it. Listen back to it objectively. Because I can tell you, they're going to be in that SIR or one of those big rehearsal places, and they might even record your guitar tracks and listen back to them and make their decision that way. Because guitar tone and, cleanness of execution is a big thing, especially in today's modern world. So you're going to want to dial in those tones. Find out what the previous guy was using. Find out, if you can, why they're making a switch. If they're making a switch for personality reasons, or for, someone's drinking too much or something like that, then, it's a good bet that they liked the way the guy was playing, but they maybe had to make the change for personality or drinking or some other reason like that. So you need to, and then listen to the record and cop the record tones as best you can. Now, you may be going in there with a completely different rig for the audition, and you're going to have to do the best with what you got. They also could be a situation where there's an amp there. They might, just for ease of use, we're going to provide an amp. Or, with today's modern modelers and stuff like that, it might be a situation like that. And if they want you to use a modeling situation, then you need to dial in those tones as precisely as you can, down to the EQ from the track and everything. But learning and practicing, and practice your patch shifts. If they're giving you, we're going to do the songs in this order, be able to go boom, 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 right into each song. Be able to have your patch changes, your pedal changes, all of that down. So you need to practice all of that. There is no excuse for being extremely prepared. But, some things that I would do, like I had an audition, I got called, and I got called to go out on the road with an act from the 60s called Gary Lewis and the Playboys. And you're thinking, oh, 60s rock, this will be easy. It's not. It wasn't. Now, there weren't any shreddy guitar parts or tapping parts that I had to learn or any of that. It was 60s music. But man, the songs had a lot more chord changes and a lot more movement and a lot more parts than you would imagine. And voicings. There were voicings in these songs that no Nashville group would ever have. There was at one point, there was I guess it was the tritone sub, but the song was in F major. It's a song called Count Me In, right? And it starts off and it's like, major F major 7, and then it goes up to like a G sharp, and then at some point it plays a F sharp dominant 7 with a flat 5. And, you wouldn't think that these, kind of voicings would be in a simple 60s pop song. Man, that stuff was way more technically, advanced harmonically than the stuff that they're putting out in Nashville now. Nashville stuff, it just seems like it's a beat and 4 chords. But, how do you memorize that? You can't just keep drilling it and keep drilling it. And I'm kind of ADHD. So I would have to, I started working on this for like a whole week. I knew I had this audition, and I would work on the songs, and I would take breaks. And when I took breaks, I would play Tetris. And Tetris is a brain exercise, so while I would take a break and then I'd work on these Tetris things, I was keeping my mind sharp. And so I would work on these songs and practice them. I got all the tones down. I got where I could, kick in. There were times where I needed a Leslie effect. So I would practice kicking in the Leslie effect, kicking it off for the solo, doing all of those different things, all the patch changes, everything. And I would do it over and over again. And when I got tired of it and I needed a break, then I'd, either have a little something to eat, or I would play Tetris. And so I'd give myself a little reprieve, and it's like, I got a little break, play a little Tetris, and then go back and work on the material more and more. So by the time I got to the gig, I knew the material and I knew it better. They put me in there and they were auditioning drummers. They were auditioning bass players. They were auditioning guitar players, and keyboard players all at the same time. So I got thrown on stage with the group, and I got thrown on stage with a drummer, and we're actually playing down the song. And the drummer I think he'd had pretty much the gig on lock. But he did make a mistake in the form of the song when we ran it down. And I was so rigid in my thinking that I was like, that's not right. But the reality was he had already put in the call, and he was going to be the guy. So it didn't matter that he made a mistake, but it was still wise that I knew what the song was supposed to do. Because, that guy made a mistake, but I can't go with him because I'm playing the song down. That's what I'm doing, and so you've got to learn the material. You've got to take breaks, but spend a lot of time on it, man. Get the tones down, everything. You're going to probably, if you're not using a modeler, you're going to probably have to build a rig for the audition, and make sure that rig is fail safe. Make sure. I had another audition I did with a band, and I got the gig. But during the audition, one of my guitar cables started, it cut out for a second. And I did the old jiggle it and it kicked back in. And fortunately, I got the gig. But after I got the gig, the guy called up and says, there was a little issue at the audition with your rig. And I just said, yeah, that was a bad guitar cable. I've got it covered. I'll have it ready. Once we get out on the road, that won't be an issue. I said, all right. So they notice all of those things, and you have to be prepared to answer for it all. Now, the other thing that I'm going to talk about is something that you can't really change, but you could work on. They're going to want you to fit in visually to the act. So, having the haircut, having the right haircut, having the right hairstyle, wearing the right clothes. You need to do your research. Look at live performance clips. That's another thing. When you're learning the material, learn the original tracks, but check out the live versions. Watch many different ones because they might play the song completely different live. Or it might not be that rigid, or they could be loose and wanting you to improvise. You need to discern all of that. Do all of that research, go above and beyond what they give you to learn so that you know that, hey, if they ask me to improvise this solo, I'm not going to be thrown for a loop. I'm going to be prepared to do that. Or if they want me to play the solo on the record, I'll play that as well. It doesn't matter. Be prepared for all of it. But the image is very important even in this day and age. They're going to want you to look the part. And they, in some cases, they might be wanting you to look like the other player so that the audience doesn't really notice a huge difference in transition. So dress the part. Now, I remember watching Dream Theater, the drum auditions. And, there was one guy that was amazing. He was an amazing player. But he came in and he had some like a Kermit the Frog t-shirt or something like that. And, Dream Theater is one of those bands that probably wears black t-shirts and high-end jeans and, or black jeans, rocker type jeans. And this guy showed up in a Kermit t-shirt with kind of the wrong haircut and kind of the wrong image. And while he was an amazing player, he didn't get the gig because he wasn't dressed for the part. You're going to be playing a role. And you need to fill that role. They're hiring you or hiring somebody else to fill that slot. And that means visually, that means sonically, and your performance. So get the haircut dialed in. Make an appointment to get your haircut and tell the stylist if you've got a good stylist. And nothing against barbers, but I've got a lot of hair. So I would always go to a salon, but I would always try to find a girl that's like a rocker, to cut my hair. Because when I tell them I want the British, English, haircut, they're going to know that look. Or I say Oasis, or I'll say Jeff Beck, or whatever it is. I'll tell them, look, I need to fit into this band. And you could show them a picture of the band and say, what can we do with my hair to try to make it so I'll look, like this guy, or I'll be able to blend into this group. And that is so important. Now, the same thing can be said for your clothes. If they're the kind of band that's trying to look like, badasses, don't show up in a Kermit the Frog t-shirt. It's just not going to serve you well. Dress the part of the gig. And that goes for footwear from head to toe. And, and that will serve you well. But I realize there's only so much you can do with your look. If your physical body type is going to stand out, that could work against you. But don't let that stop you. Sometimes if you're the most prepared and you're the most ready to do the gig and you dress the part, Sometimes if you don't physically fit into the appearance of the group, they'll just say, look, this is the best player that we auditioned. We're going to give them the slot. And they might say, hey, we want you to hit the gym, or we want you to work with our trainer, or who knows. I mean, any of those things can happen. But if you do all of those things I've talked about, learn the material, watch multiple live performances, any one you can get of all the songs. Generally, an audition is 3 or 4 songs. But learn them inside and out. Live version, studio version, acoustic version, whatever. Learn everything. Be prepared. And it wouldn't hurt if you have the time and you're able to do it. Learn their entire live show. Go above and beyond, because let's say everybody kind of nails all 3 songs, right? You tell them when they go up to you and say, hey man, good job. What do you think? You tell them, say, look, I really want this gig and I have learned your entire show. I know the live versions, I know the acoustic versions, and I am ready to go tonight. So thank you so much for having me on this audition, and I hope I get the gig. If you give them a speech like that, and it's not malarkey, you've learned all the material and you're ready to go and your rig is ready, there's a good chance you're gonna get the gig.